Donald Trump has unveiled plans for a new class of battleship named after himself. The president pledged that the new Trump-class vessels would be bigger, faster and 100 times more powerful than the last US battleships, which were decommissioned decades ago after the Navy deemed them obsolete due to modern submarine and missile technology. Here's President Trump speaking at his Florida compound, Mar-a-Lago.
We envision that these ships will be the first of a whole new class of battleships to be produced in the years to come. From Theodore Roosevelt, the Great White Fleet, you remember that, the Great White Fleet, to the legendary USS Missouri, whose massive guns helped win World War II. America's battleships have always been unmistakable symbols of national power. We stopped making them for whatever reason, I don't know.
Now let's bring in Simon Diggins for the reasons, a defense, military and security analyst joining us from London. Simon, how likely is it that these Trump-class ships are actually being built?
Good morning to you. I mean, there is a problem with building ships at the moment in terms of the numbers being produced and the time it takes to do that. We know that from a different place, from the construction of the aircraft carriers. The US plan was to have some 5 or plus of the new aircraft carriers. There's one in existence already, the USS Gerald R. Ford. That's the one that's been sailed to the Caribbean as part of the pressure on President Maduro and Venezuela. But it takes a long time to do that. And I think American shipbuilding capacity is more limited than it was in the past. So there is a possibility that this may be an ambition that takes much longer to produce than America wants at the moment.
Now, the large battleships were phased out decades ago. What purpose could these new ships possibly serve on the modern naval battlefield, except being very juicy targets?
Well, I think all ships are targeted. I think the navies of the world have worked out that you need to have kind of layered defence around them. The same applies to the aircraft carriers. They have anti-aircraft destroyers, they have submarines, they have aircraft, they have anti-missile defences. So that's part of it from there. But I think the main purpose is strategic. And I noted in your article from the speech that President Trump made, he talked about the Great White Fleet. He talked about the idea of an American fleet that could sail around the world, because that's what happened in going back over a century with President Theodore Roosevelt. And it was the start of America saying that we are now a global and world power. And it's also interesting, it's President Roosevelt, because the statements we've had out of President Trump about the so-called Trump corollary, which is all about US being the dominant power, predominant power in the Western Hemisphere, is also key to it. He's talked about dominance of the Western Hemisphere, and we've seen it in all sorts of reasons, not just Venezuela. We've seen it in the attempt to turn Canada to the 51st state, claiming Greenland. But the same President Theodore Roosevelt was the man who talked about the Trump corollary, the Roosevelt corollary about dominance of the Western Hemisphere, and is also the man who sent around the Great White Fleet around the world. So I think what's happening is President Trump is making a strategic statement, not necessarily a naval statement.
Coming to that, do you, or the US Navy planners for that matter, see any operational gap that these battleships could fill?
Well, I think they're modern battleships. So we are talking about a mixture of missiles, guns, the whole range of modern battlefield weapons, use of AI. What you'd also expect to see around them is a whole kind of series of kind of a drone navy flying around this. So it's a kind of different sort of battleship. So we're not talking about World War II battleships with large guns and everything goes there. We're talking about a very powerful ship that has multi-purposes, multi-weapon systems, and that can be used across the piece. And the key to it is now is you have this idea of a sort of single crewed ship, but around it will have a whole series of drones, both underwater and above water, which would also act as both its sensors, but also as weapon systems in its own right. And that's the sort of way in which warfare, both in other domains and the air and also by land, is also going. So I think in that sense, which this will feel a different thing. The naming, calling it a battleship, a destroyer, or a frigate, the definitions of those tend to change over time. But this idea of kind of capital ships that have this variety of weapons systems, I think, is there. probably only countries like America, China perhaps, and maybe Russia can afford that class of ship. Other nations, even countries like my own with a strong navy, would be probably reluctant to put their money into something of quite this scale and size.
Thank you very much. Simon Diggins there, Defence and Security Analyst, joining us from London. Thank you, Simon.
My pleasure.